want to play a game?
They're here.
Welcome to another episode of Blood, Gore, and Ghouls. I'm your host, Ian Van Gool. Each week, we'll be talking about horror movie news, horror topics, fun facts, questions, and anything else horror-related that you'd like to hear about. You can find me at twitch.tv/Ian Van Gool, as well as on YouTube at Ian Van Gool, and on TikTok at Ian.VanGoal. You can get your very own Ghoul Squad merch at GhoulSquadShop.com. Be sure to join our Ghoul Squad Discord so you can stay up to date on all the stream, music, podcast news, and updates. Share movie recommendations, trivia, song requests, and subjects for the podcast, as well as much, much more. You can also find the audio portion of this podcast on all platforms where you listen to podcasts. All links will be in the show notes, as well as on my Linktree page, which is on all my social media accounts. So let's get right into the horror news from the past week. Just a few things here. First one, The Exorcist Believer has had its release date pushed up a week to October 6th, all because of Taylor Swift. Now, originally it was scheduled for October 13th release date. It was moved up a week after the announcement that Taylor Swift's The Eras Tour will be hitting theaters that same day. It was bumped up so it didn't have to compete with Taylor Swift. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, I feel like that's two very different audiences. Unless a lot of you horror kids out there also rock out to Taylor Swift. No judgment here, just seems a little unlikely. But I mean, from a box office standpoint, I get it. But it is a fun little thing to kind of joke about. But yeah, I'm fine with it. I'll get it a week early now. So Exorcist Believer out October 6th. It's officially spooky season, so horror movies will be showing up more often on streaming services. Peacock released a giant haul of horror on September 1st, and will be giving us some old school classics on September 15th as well. So if you subscribe to Peacock, you should have a decent catalog of horror movies to browse through. Moving on to something a bit different. So Doja Cat released her new music video for her song Demons. Now I checked it out. I'm not a huge fan of the music myself, just not my style, but the video was pretty cool. It's a very horror-based video. It stars Christina Ricci and has several different horror movie references. I posted it in the Ghoul Squad Discord so you can check it out. Like I said, music's not for me, but the video is pretty cool. So go check it out. The last thing that we have, a new fan film is out on YouTube titled Dylan's New Nightmare. It was a fan sequel to Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which saw Freddy enter the real world and terrorize Heather Langenkamp and her fictional son, played by Miko Hughes. Now, Hughes returns for this fan film. I checked it out last night. I did a review on it. I was pretty impressed with it. It made me really want to see a full movie of it. I thought it was done really well, and the actor who played Freddy did a pretty good job. It's, of course, lower budget, but it looked good. Freddy's makeup was already better than the remakes, so I was stoked on that. But I also posted that in Discord as well, so go check it out. It's only about 30 minutes, so it's a pretty quick watch. But like I said, I really enjoyed it. So that's all the news for this week. So we're going to get into our main topic. So today we're talking about horror sequels that are better than the original. Now, of course, this is all opinion-based, and to be more precise, my opinion. So you may agree or disagree with some of these, and that's all good. But here are 15 of my choices for sequels that are better than the original. So we're going to start off strong here with The Devil's Rejects. This one has a very different feel from House of a Thousand Corpses. This is the second movie in Rob Zombie's Firefly family trilogy, and it's been one of my favorite horror movies for a very long time. Now, House of a Thousand Corpses is great, and I'm a huge fan of it, but The Devil's Rejects is such a drastic change in tone, brutality, and theme. House is a love letter to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, also pays tribute to more supernatural and monster-type movies, whereas Devil's Rejects is more grounded in reality, took inspiration from real-life criminals like Charles Manson. This one gets grim and dark. The characters are fleshed out a bit more, and it's just overall more brutal. So I think all three films in this trilogy are great in their own right, but Devil's Rejects is my favorite for sure, and I prefer it over House of Thousand Corpses. Next one, we're going to kick it a little old school here. We're going to go Dawn of the Dead, the original. So this is George A. Romero's follow-up to Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead is a classic and another favorite of mine. But I've always enjoyed Dawn of the Dead just a bit more. And I love the mall setting and the characters. We get a lot more blood and gore, and it's a bit more comedic or lighthearted overall. It's another one that you can't really go wrong with any of the first three. But Dawn of the Dead is the best of them, in my opinion. And it is kind of a gray area, too, because I don't know if I would really say it's a sequel, per se. I mean, we have Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. It's all in the same universe, created by George A. Romero, all the same director. But none of them really recognize the previous movie. So there could be an argument there that they're not technically sequels, but we're not going to argue here. So I would say Dawn of the Dead over Night of the Living Dead. From there, we're going to go to The Purge Anarchy. So if you see my review for The Purge, then you're probably aware that I'm not much of a fan of it. I love the concept of it, but I didn't care about the family or the dumb decisions that they made. I wanted to see what was going on outside. So when The Purge Anarchy was released, I got my wish. We get to see all the action and the fucked up stuff that's happening outside, and we get Frank Grillo being a boss. Everything about it is an improvement over the first. I do like the cast of the first movie. But yeah, I was just pretty much annoyed with that one. So like I said, I wanted to see what was outside. So when Anarchy was released, I got just that. It's just, ridiculous action and terror for hour and a half, 2 hours, however long it is. But yeah, I really enjoyed that one. That was my favorite in the franchise. And I think it was a very big step up from the first. Again, my opinion, so take it or leave it. From there, we go Child's Play. So Child's Play 2. Now, this one is a close one. I have mad love for the first movie, but I think Child's Play 2 is a little better overall. We get more action, more blood and gore, and the start of Chucky's iconic personality. Now, the kills in this one are iconic and a step up from the first one. Chucky's more animated, a lot more involved in this one. I also really like the character of Kyle. She's a badass and has good on-screen chemistry with Alex Vincent's Andy. So overall, I just enjoy this one a little bit more than the first, but really you can't go wrong with either one. I just like this sequel, just a little bit more than the original. Then we have 28 Weeks Later. This is another close one for me. So 28 Days Later is a really good film. This one seems a little more put together. I love the score and how it's incorporated into the scenes, especially the opening. The cast is great, and this one is just as brutal, if not even more brutal than the first one. There's a lot more feels in this one, and I just enjoy it overall just a bit more than the first one. But again, it's one of those where you can't really go wrong with either one. It just comes down to personal preference, and I prefer the sequel over the original. Now the next one is going to be, what's the word? Well, we'll see. So this is Evil Dead 2, but also Evil Dead 2013. So comparing Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 is a tough one for me. Now I have to say that Evil Dead 2 is a better movie overall as far as production, effects, and iconic scenes. Personally, I prefer to watch the first one because I love it so much, but I wouldn't say it's the best at all. Now, the Evil Dead 2013 is my favorite of the franchise. There's a lot of opinions, confusion, and misconceptions about this one. I do have an episode planned about remakes, reboots, requels that we will get into in the future, so I won't go into too much detail right now about this. But I believe this to be a sequel or a requel, as the cool kids call it these days. I love that this one went with a more serious route and sprinkled in the comedy of the first two movies. We get way more blood, gore, and brutality. I love everything about the 2013 movie. So I'd say, in my opinion, it's better than all of them. But if we're even just comparing the first three, Evil Dead 2 has more of the iconic scenes. So I would say that's probably the better of the movies. But as far as my personal opinion, I still like the first one the best. But it's all opinion based, so who's to say? Moving on, Aliens. Now, this is one that I don't necessarily agree with, but the general consensus is that it's better. Now, I do love the movie, but I feel like it loses all the horror aspects of the first one. So, as a movie, it probably is better, but as a horror sequel, I don't think it is. I still prefer the slasher stalker feel of the original over the kind of action war movie feel of the second. Um, but again, all comes down to personal preference. Like I said, if we're just comparing it as a movie, Aliens probably is better, but I just prefer Alien and the horror feel that comes with Alien. From there, we go to The Conjuring. So, The Conjuring 2, I think, is better overall. So, it's another close one for me. The first Conjuring movie is probably the better movie, again, if we're comparing just movies. But I do prefer this one. So I enjoy the main story more, as well as the numerous ghosts and demons that we get in it. They're all pretty creepy overall. We get the old man, we get the crooked man, and then we get the nun. Now I think this was a step up from the original as far as entertainment, and it's always a fun watch for me. Now next week we'll find out if we can add the Nun 2 to this list, which I really hope we can. Next up is Ouija, Origin of Evil. So here's one that's not even close. So the first movie is a mess, has lame scares, just isn't very good. Origin of Evil is quite the opposite though, and it's directed by Mike Flanagan, so it's really no surprise. It's a major step up from the first. If you haven't watched this movie because of the disappointment of the first, then please go check it out. It's way better, much different from the first. It's just overall way better. I don't really need to say anything else. Now we get into another one that's kind of tricky. So 10 Cloverfield Lane is a sequel to Cloverfield. It's probably the oddest on this list due to the fact that it doesn't feel, look, or really have anything to do with the first movie. Now, Cloverfield was a great movie overall. I really wish that it wasn't found footage. The found footage aspect annoyed me. I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I would have if it was just filmed normally. But 10 Cloverfield Lane does away with the found footage. It tells a story that's very different from the first. Overall, I really enjoy this movie. I think it's the better of the two. I really like the story. I like the actors and the characters. And if it didn't have Cloverfield in the title, you wouldn't even know it was in that universe until pretty much the end. So definitely recommend 10 Cloverfield Lane. Great movie. The third movie in the franchise, Cloverfield Paradox, should be avoided at all costs. Definitely the weakest out of all of them. From there, we get Insidious Chapter 2. That is another close one for me. The first movie is probably the better movie, again, if we're just comparing an overall movie. But this one comes down to the villain for me. So the lipstick demon from the first movie, he's cool and all, but again, he has those Darth Maul vibes, which were not the best. I love the creepiness and overall look of the Bride in Black, though, in this one. I enjoyed the story overall. So yeah, this one just really comes down to that preference. Otherwise, they are very, very close for me. I do really enjoy both of the Insidious movies, but I think Chapter 2 is just a little bit better. Keeping with that same vibe, Annabelle Creation. So the first Annabelle movie is decent, but nothing great overall. Now, Annabelle Creation is a prequel, and it's a much better, creepier story. I enjoyed the characters, the backstory, and also how it does tie into the first movie. The third movie was a bit of a disappointment for me after this one, because it just felt like a direct sequel to the main Conjuring movies instead of an Annabelle sequel. So for me, as far as the Annabelle quote-unquote franchise goes, I think Creation is the best of those movies. Then we're going to kick it old school yet again. We're going to go with Slumber Party Massacre 2. It's another one that comes down to personal preference. So if you're familiar with these movies, the first one has the driller killer. Second one has another driller killer, but he's a little bit more of a rock star. So I like the killer more in this one. He said he is a rock star. He has a drill attached to a guitar. I mean, how can I not like this one more? It's more campy, it's goofier, and it's all around more enjoyable movie for me. So again, personal preference, I enjoy Slumber Party Massacre 2 over the first one. Speaking of campy, and we talked about this last week, so we'll just touch on it real quick. Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. So this one is a possible answer for me. I do enjoy it more than the first, but I wouldn't say it's a better movie overall. Like, probably not close as far as comparing movies. The original is iconic. It's hard to top it in this franchise. I just prefer the second one only really because of Chop Top and the campiness. If we had Chop Top in the original movie, I would probably like it a lot more. But that's what it comes down to for me. If I had to choose one, like if I had, life or death, had to choose one, I would still go with the original just because it is so iconic. But as far as enjoyability and characters, I'd have to go with Part 2 personally. And then our final one of the night. So I just rewatched these movies for some of my reviews this week. And we're talking about Sleepaway Camp 2. So I'm not a fan of the first movie. It's a cult classic, but I feel like it's only still talked about because of its infamous ending. The whole movie is just cringy. The acting's terrible. The characters are annoying or very cringy. And the whole thing just feels gross. Like it's not a good feeling. Like most times when I watch the campy 80s horror, like it's fun. It's a fun time. I enjoy it. With Sleepaway Camp, I just feel gross after watching it. And it's more so with the characters throughout the movie. It's just, I don't know. If you've seen it, it just has those vibes. It has nothing to do with Angela at all. Angela's the best character in the whole movie. It's just everyone else is bad. So I checked out Sleepaway Camp 2. I hadn't watched it in a while, and I definitely prefer this one over the original. The sequel, in my opinion, it's just much better. It's still not a great movie, but it has that 80s feel and the campiness that I'm a sucker for. So there's still a lot of ridiculousness to this movie, but without the cringe of the first. I would choose this one over the first one every time, no question about it. So that's my 15 horror sequels that are better than the original, in my opinion. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know on YouTube, Facebook, or in Discord. Did I miss any? Are there other sequels that you prefer over the original? Let me know, and I'm sure we'll be doing a part 2 to this in the future. Now, I did get a couple other opinions from my fellow ghouls. So Leanna says that she prefers Saw 2 over the first one. She says, and I quote, Saw was amazing, but the depth that they brought into Jigsaw and Amanda's characters, as well as the setup for a franchise, really happened because of Saw 2. Now, it's a hard one to disagree with, but I would say, is Saw being a franchise a good thing? Now, it just so happens that I do have another episode planned that looks into the pros and cons of standalone movies, of trilogies, and franchises. So we will get into that a little later on. But thank you, Leoners, for your sequel preference. I'd say I'd prefer the first one over any of the sequels, but I also agree with you that the second one started the franchise, and it's still a pretty good watch overall. And our very own Ghoulie Julie also said that she prefers Hellraiser 2 over Hellraiser. Now, she didn't give me any reason why, so I'm not sure about that. But I've given her plenty of shit for this over the past few weeks. But of course, it's all in good fun. We can all love horror and kindly disagree with what movie is better than the other. At the end of the day, they're movies. They bring us together. They don't need to tear us apart. So your opinion is your opinion. My opinion's mine. Let's just enjoy the movies. But that will do it for another episode of Blood, Gore, and Ghouls. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to hang out with us. Be sure to follow on Twitch at Ian Van Ghoul, join the Ghoul Squad Discord, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on TikTok at Ian.VanGhoul. All links are posted in Linktree on all social media. Until next week, I've been your host, Ian Van Ghoul. Have a ghoulish week and stay safe out there.